Hello everyone, this is Ponder on Weather. In this update, we have a very active setup over the next 3 days with multiple rounds of severe weather, followed by a rapid warm-up heading into this weekend and early next week for some, but a big cool down for others. Then a Rex blocking pattern sets up by the end of next week. Good morning, everyone. How's it going out there? This is your May the 4th update. Man, we got a lot to get to this morning, but if you are new to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. Let's take a look at the overall newest advisory from the Storm Prediction Center. If you want to follow along, the date is above my head. So let's take a look at the setup for this morning, because we have a very powerful low-level jet coming in, and we have another warm front that's going to be surging from the south to the north, overlaying with the surface low going to be forming into the Rockies here. And that's where the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted that enhanced risk for severe weather today in parts of Oklahoma and parts of Texas here. That swings all the way down into West Texas, where things start to get active into the afternoon hours, into the early evening hours. But we also have a marginal risk for severe storms in today in parts of the Carolinas and Virginia. So let's break this down. So we are going to be susceptible to seeing some of that very large hail today. We have a lot of lift in the atmosphere. We have a lot of cold air aloft. The dew points are rapidly surging with that warm front. And there's the warm sector right in the bullseye where this hatched risk is, essentially in West Texas, all the way up into Oklahoma, central Oklahoma, feeding all the way into the Texas Panhandle. These whole areas is susceptible to seeing some of that golf ball size hail or greater, and the atmosphere has potential today, producing even some of those baseball, maybe even some of those isolated softball size hail, potential hailstones. And this whole sector where it is that dotted line, this hatched risk. But the most susceptible places are going to be anywhere from, say, Wichita Falls into central Oklahoma, back in here to the Texas Panhandle, with the greatest opportunity to possibly see some of that very large hail. So it is a dangerous day ahead, and we will be doing live coverage later on this afternoon. But we also have a kind of a light risk for some of these hailstones. Could be on the quarter size variety up here into the Carolinas and parts of Virginia today. So let's take a look at the overall tornadic setup, because that's also going to be pretty high today across those same areas where they have that enhanced risk into Oklahoma and to far northwestern portions of, say, the Metroplex, into Wichita Falls, points into central Oklahoma, back into the Texas Panhandle here. Some of these could be strong tornadoes of those EF2 type tornado variety, as that really taps into that low-level jet. There's a lot of instability in the atmosphere, and there's a lot of shear, unfortunately, and the air is going to be rotating within this sector. So you need to be staying on high alert in these areas and stay weather aware. Like I mentioned, we will be doing live coverage later on this afternoon. So let's take a look at the overall setup, because we do have a powerful low pressure center that is just almost forming out here into the Rockies. We have a very active dry line this morning out here in ports of New Mexico here, but there's the warm front. We had a pretty powerful cold front that came through Texas yesterday. They were only in the 60s, but this morning it's a big difference with kind of a soup kitchen out there with, you know, rapidly warming temperatures. And these dew points are already in the 70s down here in South Texas into Central Texas. But as we move the clock here, as we go through the morning hours, you can see the surge as the warm front will be lifting back north. And as we stop the clock about 2 o'clock, that warm front is going to be right along this boundary into central Oklahoma. The dry line starts to get active out here in West Texas. There's the surface low going to be developing, and then where the warm sector is, that's where all the instability is, and that's where the setup for multiple rounds of severe weather as we get into the afternoon hours, tapping into those warmer dew points of those 70 upwards to low 70s. But you can see where it stops. It pretty much stops right around the kind of the Kansas border there. So it's mainly right along the Kansas border and southward, where they do have those higher dew points and all that instability, where that warm front is going to be elongated to the south of there, where they have some elevated storms this morning. but those aren't severe, but they will turn severe as we get into the afternoon hours, into the early evening. So kind of the bullseye from about 2 to 8 o'clock in the afternoon out here in West Texas, going into portions of northwestern of the DFW Metroplex into Wichita Falls, headed into the Oklahoma City area, but kind of tapping into those higher dew points, but the surface low. As we get into the evening hours, we're going to have a sort of a lull back into Texas, but I do think it's going to be kind of a squall line pushing through. You can actually see it about 7 o'clock in the morning where the dew points start to come down again. That's that cold front that's going to be pushing across into Texas with another squall line, could be on the form of some damaging winds and some larger hail as we get into the morning hours, pushing through Texas, and that'll push all the way through Oklahoma, through Arkansas as we get into the day tomorrow, where they do have another risk for severe storms as we get into tomorrow time frame. Well, let's take a look at the overall setup on the tornado parameter index as we get into this morning. So they're pretty low right now, so the low level jet is starting to get really active, but it will start to get cranking as we get into about that 2 o'clock time frame. I think a lot of the dynamics are really going to start to merge together. We should start seeing some isolated bubblers start to form down here, and anything that forms ahead of the main solid line, that's going to be discrete supercells, and the air is going to be rotating within this area. And as we get into your 4 or 5 o'clock time frame, the tornado parameters are hitting fairly high. So that's why they do have that hatched risk for a strong possibility of some of those tornadoes, and some of those could be on the EF2 type tornadoes, or even possibly an EF3 type tornado. It can't be ruled out up here into portions of central Oklahoma and far, say, Wichita Falls, back into the panhandle of Texas. But even down south into the West Texas, down here towards West Texas, I think things get active again about that 2 to 8 o'clock time frame. We'll stop the clock here into that 8 o'clock in the evening time frame. I think that's when it's going to be kind of at the peak intensity. So we could be looking at numerous supercells in these sectors where the tornado parameters are hitting fairly high today. So it is a dangerous day ahead, and you need to stay on high alert as this low-level jet will still really start to tap into this energy going into the afternoon hours, into the evening hours. I think we do have a kind of a little bit of a lull in the activity, but I think it ramps up again with that boundary, with that cold front that's going to be pushing across into Texas as we get into early tomorrow morning. That'll be another possibility of a kind of a lower end risk of some damaging winds and some larger hail, a lesser tornado threat into the morning hours. But I think it ramps back up again a little bit as it heads into portions of Arkansas going into your Thursday time frame. So let's take a look at the setup. And this morning, here is the latest update from the HRRR model. This is the high resolution guidance for the next 48 hours or so. Like I mentioned, this morning, we've got some elevated storms. So these aren't severe. This basically forms ahead, just kind of north of the warm front right now. The warm front is still further south here, but ahead of the warm front, we are getting some elevated storms this morning into portions of Oklahoma and southern Kansas here. But as we get into the afternoon hours, we can see that instability is still ahead of the warm front here, back into portions of Kansas, heading into portions of Missouri and parts of Arkansas. But about 1 o'clock, right? So about 1, 2 o'clock, we start to see those little bubblers start to form back here into West Texas. Anything that forms within this sector is going to turn severe fairly quickly. So we have to be on high alert of these little isolated supercell thunderstorms producing some very large hail, some damaging winds, and that tornado threat as the atmosphere will begin to rotate as that low pressure system really starts to dig. These east southeast winds has all the lift that's needed, and that's going to be creating that kind of that triple point setup today as we get deeper into the afternoon. So you can see as we get into that 3 o'clock time frame, we start to see more cells trying to form, and these little cells, anything that forms within this sector is going to be turning severe really quickly. And then anything, kind of the discrete supercells from like 2 to 8 o'clock time frame. But as we get into your, say, 9 o'clock time frame, we've got numerous storms popping up over portions of, say, Wichita Falls, heading into central Oklahoma, going back into parts of Kansas here, into portions of Missouri. Heading into your, say, 10 o'clock to your midnight time frame, you get a lull here in Texas, but up to the north, you're still pretty active into the overnight hours, into the midnight time frame, into Oklahoma, back into parts of Kansas here, into Missouri. And as this continues to push across through the morning hours, that surface low will start to move with that cold front. Now we have a pretty nasty squall line that's going to be forming into the overnight hours. This is 3 o'clock in the morning, heading into Oklahoma. It starts to tail off here into ports of Texas here, and this will form into a squall line into the morning hours and push across North Texas, getting into central Texas, back into central Oklahoma, all the way in through central Missouri here, into portions of Illinois with some rain. And then this will push across through your 10, 11 o'clock in the morning time frame. Where the Storm Prediction Center does in fact have that enhanced risk for severe storms as this dry line, and that everything kind of moves through with this cold front ahead of it. We are going to be under that severe threat going into your day on Thursday, so that enhanced risk continues to push through portions of East Texas, get into Arkansas and northern Louisiana here, and those storms could still be severe into parts of North Texas, pushing into East Texas as far south as into Central Texas, eventually getting into, say, the Houston area, all the way through Louisiana, back into Mississippi, parts of Western Tennessee, and all the way further south into central and southern Missouri here as this continues through the day. There's your setup on your hail threat, because some of these stones could be pretty large as they continue to tap into that warm sector and the heat of the day by the time we get into Thursday afternoon, with those hail core pushing all in that areas where they do have that enhanced risk in play. But there's your tornado threat. We do have a 5% chance of tornadoes within this sector where they do have that enhanced risk. So definitely be on high alert as we get into your Thursday time frame. So let's take you back to the HRRR model on your Thursday and take a look through as we go through noontime and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's those storms through Arkansas, all the way through Texas, pushing through parts of all the way into central Texas. It'll eventually push all the way through South Texas and Louisiana, getting into portions of Mississippi there. Into your 10 o'clock time frame should be over, say, the Houston Metroplex, into central Louisiana, all the way through portions of Mississippi, headed into the overnight hours on Friday, pushing all the way across into the deep south and kind of winding itself down. You can see where the surface low is by then, up here into portions of Missouri as we go into your early Friday morning time frame. But as this continues to push across, we do have that setup. This is your day 3 risk on Friday. So we do have this finally pushing off into the southeast. You had a kind of a break for all the severe weather down here in the portions of the southeast, but the severe weather does unfortunately come back for you as we get into your Friday time frame with yet another slight risk for severe storms. So we got 3 days in a row as we follow these storms from Texas through the Arklatex all the way into the southeast as we get into your Friday time frame. So let's kind of break this down in the overall setup over the next 7 days on the 500 millibar. And you can take a look at this setup. You can, again, follow along at the date at the top left-hand corner of my screen. Let's take a look at those troughs. We have a pretty good, that significant trough in the midsection of the country. That's going to bring all the severe weather threat for Wednesday, going into Thursday, heading into Friday. So that pushes off into Friday. And this gets off into the East Coast as we get into this weekend on your Saturday time frame for as you start your Mother's Day weekend. But out here in the midsection of the country, we got a pretty rapid warm up for many as those southwest winds really crank. We got a very high pressure and ridging starts to play into Texas. That'll bring these rapidly surging warmer temperatures in the midsection of the country. But at the same time, we have a pretty significant trough that's going to be forming off into the Pacific Northwest with well below average temperatures and more unsettled weather for them. But let's move the clock here. And as we get through your Sunday time frame, we could be looking at some record high temperatures in portions of Texas for your Sunday, Mother's Day. But those warmer temperatures continue to surge. And what happens by kind of the middle to the end of next week, you can actually see these kind of deepening reds start to form by you're getting in your Tuesday and your Wednesday time frame. That's a Rex blocking pattern. You can see it with the ridge forming up to the north. We could start to lower the pressures underneath. And yeah, you know, tropical storm season, you know, hurricane season actually doesn't start till June 1st. But hey, we might be looking at trying to get some lower pressures down here off the Carolina coast as a low pressure starts to form within this blocking pattern here. And as we continue through time, that block will just form that ridge over portions of the Northeast here, followed by that significant trough out west. And again, we'll be watching this area right here. If there's some sort of tropical type feature that might come out of this setup, we could be looking at possibly our first named storm of the season, you know, as we get deeper into that second towards possibly the middle of the week of middle of the month of May. So I know that's a long ways off, but that would kind of give you an idea of this setup as we get into late next week. So let's kind of break this down. Let's take a look at off the west of this setup for today. So here's the overall surface map out west. Let's look at all the instability. So you've got all that low pressure system over Texas with the snow that's going to be falling on the northwest side of there into the Rockies. There's that pretty significant trough out here into portions of the Northwest with all that more rain showers for them, for Washington and Oregon. It's going to be cold enough to snow into portions of Idaho. And as we continue to move the needle all the way through in the weekend, you can see it's pretty dry across the midsection of the country. That's where the ridge is going to be in store as you get into the weekend. But we have that developing trough. So we got sporadic showers, kind of snow showers into portions of the Intermountain West. And then that's will continue to push across with just multiple series of troughs going to be digging in off the Pacific Northwest, bringing much needed rain back into portions of Northern California. But look at the snow falling in the Sierra Nevada, going back into Oregon here, into Idaho, back into Montana here, where it's going to be cold enough to snow. So we got a cold side of the system. We also have a warm side, and that cold air will continue to remain in place all the way through, on Monday, going into your Tuesday, May the 10th time frame with those much cooler conditions. So let's take a look at some of those temperatures off the west coast there. And let's take a look at the temperatures for today. You can see the warm up going to be starting to take shape into the midsection of the country as we get into your kind of into your weekend time frame. But those much cooler conditions continue to remain for portions of the Northwest, but it really starts to get cold as we get into your weekend time frame. But out to the midsection of the country, we're into Texas. Yeah, look at those rapid temperatures. I mean, we're talking upwards to as we get into your Saturday time frame. Let's take you to Saturday. We could be looking at hundreds. Look at that, guys. 106, 107, 104. So that's plenty of almost record heat down there. But look at the temperatures as we get into your Saturday afternoon. So some of those temperatures are almost freezing back here into the Intermountain West, but that just continues. But the surge of warmer temperatures in Texas, and that'll filter north as we get deeper into the middle of next week with those 80s lifting all the way up into Nebraska, back into the Dakotas, and then well below average temperatures out here for as we get into your Monday time frame. And then that just continues going into your Tuesday. So let's flip the needle and head off to the east, right? So here's the East Coast on the surface map. So I'm trying to get everybody in to kind of show you a full picture of the what's happening for the rest of the for the whole entire week for much of the United States. As we move through your Thursday timeframe, there's that storm threat over portions of the Arkansas, but that will shift into portions of the southeast, with all your rain, storms down to the south, but then rain into your Illinois Valley, back into the mid-Atlantic states, and that'll head up into portions of the Northeast as we get into your weekend with the low pressure systems forming out there. But we do have that kind of more of a blocking pattern that will set up as we get into starting to get into early in the middle of next week. And you can see that low pressure center trying to form off the Carolina coast here. So we'll be watching as this ridge will start to form up here, start to lower some of those pressures underneath. And, as we go through time, that kind of a Rex blocking pattern will keep this surface low out over open waters for an extended period of time. and it'll block everything kind of pushing from to the north as you start to feel those warmer temperatures start to move in. Let's take a look at some of those temperatures. So here's the setup for today, and we'll walk you through the next 7 days or so. You got widespread 70s, if not 80s, heading into portions of the southeast. You're still in that warm sector there. Plenty cold, plenty cooler conditions as they kind of hang on for well to the north up into the the Great Lakes and portions of the far into New England there. There's into the day on Friday, going into your weekend time frame with those temperatures starting to surge out there in Texas, but then cooler conditions move in, but that ridge start to develop and will start to shift eastward as we go into early next week with those rapid surge. Look at those temperatures into Monday with upper 80s for Iowa. I mean, this is Minnesota, guys. We're talking upper 80s here, if not almost 90 degrees. So that's a pretty big ridge is going to be forming in the midsection of the country, and that will shift off into the east as we extend into early next week. Is that kind of that Rex blocking pattern will set up over portions of the Northeast as we get towards the end of next week. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. I know we had a lot to cover this morning, so check back with me later on this afternoon as we do live storm coverage across Texas and Oklahoma this morning. So let's I appreciate you guys watching. Do hit the subscribe button if you hadn't already, and catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after storm.